Welcome to the third episode of WonderFix. I'm this week's special host, but you can call me Grumpy. Quick recap on who's not in the picture. WonderFix, the little thing that we have here, focuses on explaining how the changes from the latest hotfix affect your game, and we also bring up some gear that is often mentioned as underperforming, and we ask our guest to make it work, and we do hope to make it work. What I definitely know that works is our returning guest for this week. Say hello, Quag.
Hello. Some of you might know me. I chit chat in the server from time to time,
Mm-hmm.
usually things of the nerdy variety. So this thing's right up my alley. I'm happy to be back. Happy to be here with Grumpy. We go way back, and it'll be pretty chill. But I think you guys will like what we have for you today.
Yeah, sure hope so. Good. So let's get right into the patch notes, shall we? So the weekly rotation for the featured run. This week's featured run involves Lechance as the boss and Master Tarnhammer as the Obelisk boss. So, Quag, what do you think about this week's run?
I think this week's featured is one of the best they've done so far. Like just
Really?
period. It's got a really good set of mobs that allows you to test out builds against different kinds of health bars. You've got some shielded enemies. You've got some tankier enemies. Some of the less fun ones you might not have enjoyed, like the blimps, are absent from this one, and that's been great. But the bosses in the run are some of the more desirable to farm in both direct and indirect sort of ways. Like Tonhammer, for example, does not have any dedicated drops. But because Tonhammer is a boss in the featured run, he still has a guaranteed loot explosion from him of Chaos Chamber exclusive gear, many of which are things that were touched this week. So that's nice. And then everyone knows LeChance with the sword explosion is high profile. So not only is it a bite-sized run, but it's got a lot of high-value gear you can get from it.
That's actually really good to know that there are no blimps in this week's run, because I personally do not like them. But each their own. I'm sure it's someone's special enemy. And the tip of Master Tarnhammer is also very good, because this means together with Lechance you have a very good run at your hands, where you can farm crystals, farm for gear, and also see what the run brings you. Great. So, also this week, the mini event, Blinked Out Badasses, it's continuing, not really returning, it's continuing. What it does is that it increases the chance for cosmetic drops from baddest bosses. And it increases the cosmetics value by 50%, so be sure to pick them up and sell them for cash money, if you still need some STU upgrades, for example. At the same time, and I think this is also a very noteworthy change, they reduce the pricing of turning Chaos Chambers into Elite. I think it's a total of only 5 crystals in a Chaos Chamber, and that is just cool in my opinion. I've tried it out last week, did some all Elite runs, and managed to amass a lot of crystals. But as someone who still doesn't have all the cosmetics, and probably you too, Quag, were you able to get any of the cosmetics you were hunting for, or do you even hunt for any cosmetics?
I pick up any cosmetics I can get.
Mm-hmm.
I have not had too much luck personally,
Mm.
but also in all honesty, I haven't been looking very hard. I've just been enjoying getting as many runs into this feature as possible, running them quickly, and just trying to get more loot. Gear farming is what drives me.
Very much understandable. Well, I do hope that you can find something very surprising this week. Would be cool.
Absolutely.
All right. From weekly events, we go straight into the hotfix changes for the weapons, and those are kind of interesting. So, up front, they changed the weapon elemental puddle damage to be based on item card damage. So, Quag, what does that mean?
Okay, so this one is just it's a good thing. It might read immediately as like, okay, I'm confused, but this is a buff. Essentially, the method by which puddles were scaling was not affected by your gear or certain pieces of your gear. So they now scale better with your damage increases. In particular, if you're a spell shot with magic bullets, this is your lucky day. um, that one in particular comes into play here. And this change in particular applies to the Envy's Puddle and the Oil and Spice.
You mentioned the Envy as one of the guns that has been, I would say, readily available compared to the Salt and Spice, which has only been recently added. How do you feel about Envy now with these changes?
So there's going to be a few repeat phrases from me
Mm-hmm.
on the subject of some of these weapons. In many of these cases, there was no. I know the community really enjoys the idea of ranking things. If you
Mm-hmm.
were to rank all of the sniper rifles, very few of them changed places. The Envy went from a decent weapon, by no means bad, not front of the pack either, but a decent weapon to use. It went to a slightly more powerful version of itself. Now, I still need to mess around a bit more with the puddles themselves. That's something I haven't quite nailed down a build for, but it seems promising. It's definitely stronger.
So that means if you were building around, let's say, the Envy in this case, it should feel more rewarding now to actually use the gun.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So yeah, lots to look forward to. Aside from that, another very notable change, aside from damage scaling increases decreases here, has been the portable sawmill change. Now this one is kind of interesting because the wording, I personally think it can be a little bit confusing if you read it for the first time. I definitely needed a few attempts to it. So what it did is the amount of ammo consumed by the portable sawmill was reduced by 1, but it also reduced the damage scaling by around 66.3% to compensate for this. So basically, you use less ammo per shot, you can shoot longer, but you deal less damage for each shot. They say that the goal was to keep the DPS similar, but allow higher total damage to the target due to sniper rifle ammo constraints. So, you, I remember, have built an entire build around the portable sawmill before this change, with I think a Spore Warden, which used the ammo regeneration if I remember correctly, and everything that a Spore Warden brings to the table. How do you feel about these changes?
So there's good news and bad news. The good
Mm-hmm.
news is they were a little harsh on themselves, and that 66% is actually only 33%. So that's a positive. The drop was not as sharp as was listed. The negative would be that the overall DPS of the weapon does not meet up to the standards of existing builds around the weapon. What I mean by that is, let's say you were using a setup such as my own, and several other people, I'm sure, have done the same thing. It's a very popular build archetype of using ammo regeneration to counteract the only weakness of the sawmill, that being that you can't shoot it for very long.
Mm-hmm.
If you already had ammo regen in place on your build with things like the Spore Warden's Quiver of Holding and the Last Gasp Ward, then you could already shoot for extended periods of time. So all you'll notice is the damage loss. But if you didn't have a build around the sawmill, it's effectively a little more player friendly as I'm just going to switch to this and use this on whatever build I happen to have type of weapon. I do think this is overall a change that I would like to see revisited at another time, maybe restore some of that damage. It on paper, it's nice to make it consume less ammo, but functionally this impacted the DPS of a weapon that I don't feel needed to change in either direction. So I'm hopeful they keep an eye on it, which they've done with several other changes. So I'm optimistic.
Oh, so am I. Here's hoping. But definitely one thing to keep in mind on the upside. Hey, if you didn't build your build around the portal sawmill, you can just slot it in 4th slot now and switch to it if you need like some quick damage on the fly, I guess. So, yep, always a silver lining. But I agree. I think it would be cool if they could have another look at this somewhere in the future. For now, let's just see how the play plays out. Another the last, in my opinion, notable buff for this week has been a Ski Prod. Across all the things that have been buffed or changed in this week's hotfix, the Ski Prod got a whole whopping 3 bullet points. First, they increased the Ski Prod's damage scaling by 25%. They also increased the Skeep Prod's beam damage scaling by 60%. And they also addressed an issue with the Skeep Prod that was causing the beam to deal less damage while using the semi-auto weapon mode. So basically, more damage, and fixed damage interaction. I'm just gonna ask, how good is it now?
Much like a couple of the other changes, namely to the Carouser and the Envy, this
Mm-hmm.
doesn't change the tier, so to speak, of the weapon.
Mm-hmm.
The Skeep Rod was already Destroyer of Worlds, one of the fastest mobbing weapons in the entire game. Truly, just you build around the Skeep Prod, entire rooms fall over, and it's not too bad on the single target either. It works as a very reliable bullet hose with a good damage formula behind it. The only
Mm-hmm.
thing with it is ammo. And the good thing about the beam functionality being addressed is that you can space out your shots and let the beams do more of your work now. You can switch to that semi-automatic fire mode, which had a scaling issue not just on the beam, but the damage itself. That has now been fixed too. You can use the semi-automatic fire mode if you want to slow down your consumption a little bit, line up those shots, use it like a more traditional sniper rifle. It has more than enough damage to do so. And the effect of the ski prod, if you don't know, is that if you shoot one enemy and then shoot another one, you will create an arc of lightning between those two enemies. It has a pretty exceptional
Oh.
range. And that's what these beam changes refer to. So not only do you have everything else the weapon does, it applies crossbolts, it's got fast projectiles, one of the fastest reload speeds in the game, great DPS overall. It's now also just creating massive electrical arcs, killing entire rooms. It's fantastic.
So are we talking like electrical arcs, very similar to the live wire when you melee an enemy twice?
They look similar.
They
They
look
look
similar.
similar.
Okay. So you guys can imagine, hopefully can imagine now what it looks like. So yeah, Ski Prod looks very good now. And to go over the last few changes that were listed in this week, we have the Carouser's damage scaling increased by 16.7%, the Envy's damage scaling by 21.4%, as well as status effect changes increased by 100% actually. The Tooth Raider's damage scaling has also been increased by 28.5%. And last but not least, the Cow Khan. The Cow Khan's damage scaling has been increased by 62.5%. Now, why did I name this one last? Not because it's last in the list, but also because it was a very popular choice for our next segment, which is called Make It Work, where we ask our guests to make the weapon at hand work. And this week, it is the Cow Khan. Well, Quack, tell us, what is this gun do? What are the pros and cons? And how does the damage increase affect it in the sniper rifle category? Even though you will have to repeat a few words there. What can you do to improve the Cow Khan's experience? And actually, what classes you feel it is most compatible with at the moment?
Okay, so this is a very, very strange weapon. It's not immediately apparent what it's trying to be. So my chosen avenue to make it do damage is I decided it's not very ammo efficient. So what if I just dump the entire ammo supply at one target as fast as possible? And that's what it's pretty good at. The What the con does is it shoots out in an alternating fire pattern. It makes a horizontal fan of projectiles, 5 projectiles. The first shot will be narrow and the second shot will be wide. Now, the weapon also consumes 5 ammo per shot, which is rather intense, and it has an interesting reload mechanic where no matter how much ammo you regenerate, it will fire based on how many you are capable of shooting with the base mag. So what this means is if you have mag size increases and bring your magazine size to 20, you can shoot 4 total times before you have to do a reload animation. Even if you have ammo regen and you get back a bullet during that time, it does not allow you to shoot a 5th time. So the most important thing with the con in terms of getting it more usable is you want your magazine size to be a multiple of 5. That's such a weird thing to say, Welcome to Wonderlands.
Math
Items are interesting.
in my Wonderlands?
You want your mag size to be a multiple of 5. It
Mhm.
allows you to get an extra shot off for each multiple you can hit. I find that 20 is the easiest to hit. 100% mag size is the easiest on a Spore Warden, which answers the question for who I feel gets the most value out of the weapon. Spore Warden has a skill Quiver of Holding that gives increased magazine size. It's 30% at 3 points. Spore Warden additionally has the Play the Angles capstone skill, which gives a chance on dealing critical hits with a gun to cause a ricochet to a nearby target, similar to how the black powder manufacturer applies this to all of its weapons. But you can play the angles with most kinds of guns. So, with a gun that hits 5 times per shot but consumes 5 ammo, efficiency is going to be a big concern. If you can hit 2 enemies per bullet, that's definitely a large efficiency increase. So, putting all of this stuff together, you take your con, you try to get to a 20 mag size, you get your Spore Warden, you slap on a bit of Stabomancer for From the Shadows, and then you go give an enemy a hug. You get as close as you possibly can to them. Bonus points if you can line up with their crit spot, and then you just pull the trigger until either the enemy's dead or you're out of ammo. And for reference, you can kill several raid bosses with this weapon before running out of ammo, and it only takes about maybe 5 seconds to dump your entire ammo supply. So
Wow.
it's extremely proficient at single target bossing, but it will only kill one target because you will not have ammo.
I see. So this weapon would serve very well as a, as you just said, bossing weapon instead of a mobbing weapon, like the Ski Protus, for example.
Right. Oh, it also applies crossbolts. Can't forget that.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
a niche utility, but each subsequent shot you do with the weapon, if you got the damage crossbolts rather than the melee crossbolts, it will be dealing more damage. And additionally, if you use the Barbalode amulet, that can help improve your ammo efficiency when in mobbing. Just
Mhm.
a neat little extra thing.
Yeah, so like I really like the interactions with the crossbows, and especially for a weapon like the Kaokan, which, as you just said, just dumps its entire magazine. This is the point that it has into the enemy, and suddenly you have like a window of like 3 seconds where 25 or like more bolts are stuck in the enemy. This can lead to some very big damage increases. If you then switch to something else, or even just get more ammo for the Kaokan. So, yeah, very insightful. And would you say, one final question, because it has been on my mind for a while now. Would you say that the Spore Warden is one of the best classes for snipers in general?
That's an interesting question. It's I think it's going to be a more case by case basis, and it'll depend largely on personal preference because the class design in this game, the multi-class system,
Mm-hmm.
it's not really a one size fits all in most scenarios. We're not going to talk about spell shot.
Yeah.
In most scenarios, it's not one size fits all. There will be a particular weapon more suited to a particular skill or a particular class feat or a particular action skill. My go-to weapon testing build that I did all of the things I mentioned today, and I use most weapons on, does happen to be a Spore Warden Sabomancer multiclass because I find it to be a fair representation of a weapon's strength. It doesn't pump too much into them in terms of big numbers because neither of those classes are good at that. But what those classes facilitate is bringing out the potential of a specific effect provided by an item, whether that be a ricochet of some sort or various other on crit effects. Spore Warden is good at bringing out the power of things when combined with other things. I think on its own, it's too muddy an answer, but
Mm-hmm.
if you pair Spore Warden with the right thing, it can be really useful in maximizing a weapon's potential.
Well, thank you for your answer on this. There you have it. So, on that note, this wraps up this segment and also wraps up the WonderFix for this week. So, on that note, thank you so much for joining me here today, Quag. And thank you
pleasure.
everyone who
Happy to be
tuned in.
back.
Little note on the side, for those who missed today's episode, we will upload it on YouTube over the weekend on our YouTube channel. Links will be posted soon in the server news. That has been all for today. So, thanks everyone for being here. And, you know what they say, keep it chaotic great.